Today, I'm here to talk about one of my most anticipated movies of the year, which is Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. I want to tell you all about what I thought and why I think a lot of you are wrong. I'm Real Slim Katie 25. Let's get into it. So, Robert Eggers, if you are not familiar, directed The Witch, or as I like to say, The Vavitch, and The Lighthouse previously. If you haven't seen either of those two films, I think they help to explain a lot of why he writes and directs things the way he does. Or rather, not why, but I only bring it up because those two films have the exact same aesthetic and feeling as this film. Now, obviously, I'm not saying the exact same aesthetic in the way that it's the same time period or whatever. I mean to say that his style is so prevalent and it makes so much sense. If you see just shots of this film, I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me exactly of this. Gothic horror with this very fresh modern feeling at the same time. Like it doesn't treat its characters and its actors as if they're in way back in ye old. It makes them feel very human and very present. Very relatable. I think it's so easy living the way we do now to compartmentalize and be like, yeah, I have nothing in common with people who lived way back then. But all of the characters in Nosferatu feel so real and so relatable, even though their circumstances are just completely different from what we live in now. If you've never seen the original 1920 Nosferatu, it is a fantastic film. It's an adaptation of Dracula. A very famous adaptation of Dracula, that is. And honestly, if you want to hear more about that, my friend Lugosi Theater on YouTube and TikTok has so much more information that I could ever talk about the history of Dracula and vampires. But this remake serves as an amazing homage to the original film. It helps build suspense using shadows and dark imagery and not showing too much to the audience. And it doesn't feel like it's trying to reinvent the wheel. It feels like it's a faithful adaptation of the story, just darker and grosser. And boy, is this movie dark and gross. Which brings me to what I wanted to talk about. Obviously, I'm not going to fully move on from this review. I thought the performances were amazing. The screenplay, you can find it online now. It's fucking brilliant. I would definitely go take a look at it. I'm probably going to refer to it later in this video too. I mean, even down to the lighting and the color grading, this movie was beautiful. And it felt like a love letter to classic horror. But like I was saying, earlier this year, I made a video about the return of sexy movies. And this is a sexy movie. It's just a sexy movie for freaks. Let me explain. This movie is supposed to be hot. It's supposed to be sexual. It's supposed to feel like that. I've seen some really interesting takes online, specifically on TikTok, about people using this as a story to talk about like Elwyn is a survivor of assault, and that's the whole relationship is victim abuser. But that doesn't make sense for this story. And I'll tell you why. Vampires and gothic horror is built on intrigue. It's built on seduction. That's part of the game. Part of why vampires are even a popular character or form of character is because they have this element of seduction. They want to suck your blood. They want you, right? You're like, there's supposed to be that element of like, it's kind of sexy, but I don't know why. And I think this movie captures that. Lily Rose Depp has this wonderful interview where she describes the relationship between Ellen Thomas and Count Orlok as a love triangle, which is super interesting because you could see it in one way as like a love line, but I feel like there's a really strong argument that Thomas has this element of seduction towards Orlok almost as well. Obviously, I'm not trying to discredit. Obviously, Count Orlok is a nasty, vile, violent character. And obviously, Ellen is tormented by this. He lives rent-free in her head, literally. And he has this like possession of her mind, right? There's definitely an element of like, ugh, that's no good. That's not good for you, girl. But she literally says it herself. You could never please me like he does. What? What? Girl. What? Also, in reading the script, I mean, even just in the last few scenes, it talks about how Ellen willingly gives herself with consent to Orlok. that she is enthralled. They breathe together. She willingly sacrifices herself and is enthralled by him. Okay, I found the receipts. He says, "Do you accept this of your own will?" Ellen says, "I do." Now, obviously, I understand that verbal consent is not always enough. It needs to be willing and enthusiastic consent, right? But literally, 3 lines later in the script, he kisses her. It is ecstasy for both of them. She shudders. She moans. Her whole body throbs as the blood rushes out of her veins. Her breathing bursts with rapture. These are all direct quotes. Ellen looks at him. He sees a fiery reckoning in her eyes. She has won. So there's this element of this obsession of him, of her, right? But also she is obsessed with him. She lets him live rent-free in her mind. She lets him obsess over all of her thoughts. And right, I get it. He traumatized her as a child. He's been haunting her nightmares. That's not healthy, right? Sure, she is victimized by him, and I'm not trying to dispute that. And I saw this amazing video from one of my favorite TikTok horror creators, Boring Blue Boy, talking about being a victim of assaults. And as many, sadly, female-bodied people are, you can hold space for both things to be true. She could be a victim of him abusing power over her, but she can also be sexually enthralled by him. And if you don't think there's space for both, it's super weird and invalidating. Life is not black and white like that. Not all victims of assault feel victimized in the moment even, or for years or months after. When somebody experiences trauma to a level like that, you don't always process that. So you can acknowledge that something is wrong, but you could also feel like an element of seduction. There is space. You can hold space for both things to be true at once. And not believing that is so black and white, man. So honestly, fuck these people on TikTok that are like, how dare you say this movie is sexy? It's such a clear allegory for assault. Sure, a movie is up to anybody's interpretation. You can believe that and take that. As a victim of assault myself, I understand why somebody would interpret this movie that way. But I also think this movie is free corny. And I think that is how this movie was intended to be viewed. Dude, even Thomas fucking likes it. Even Thomas is down and dirty for Orlok. But yeah, fuck these people that saying this movie isn't meant to be sexually charged. It is. It's a vampire movie. It's the fucking point. I think it was in the same interview I mentioned earlier, but Lily Rose Depp was talking about how they want you to feel a little turned on and then disgusted and asking why you feel like that. This movie has everything. A lesbian level of yearning, truly repulsive vampires, and a mustache that I can't tell whether I love it or hate it. I kind of hope that they re-release this movie for Valentine's Day. And I urge you, if you find this interesting, there is so much intrigue about the original making of the 1922 Nosferatu, and Dracula in general has a bunch of really interesting lore that makes this movie even more admirable when you see how much of a love letter it is to the character and to the genre itself. Fucking love this movie. I think this is my favorite Robert Eggers movie. I find The Lighthouse, and don't sue me and don't take away my pretentious movie watcher card, but I find The Lighthouse a little slow for my tastes. And the same with The Vavitch. But this movie felt perfectly paced to me in terms of action and intrigue. But I also had more buy-in for the characters and was already familiar with the plot, obviously, going in. So I was already sad for this movie. Also, hey, it's been a few years since I've watched either of those, so maybe it's time for a rewatch. Let me know, did you guys think Nosferatu was sexy? Or am I like a fucking freak? I don't know. Let me know if you think I'm a freak in the comments below. And let me know what you thought. Also, if you like this, me and my best friend Louie make videos like this all the time. So feel free to check out what we do. Anyways, talking about this movie and thinking about Thomas made me miss my simp. So I'm going to go hang out with him. Anyways, bye!